I'm Sadie, 29, female, and on the morning of my last birthday in my 20s, my fiancé left me a note, ran off with a flashy cosmetic surgeon, and thought he'd gotten away clean. He was wrong. I didn't get angry, I didn't get even, I got quiet. And then I unleashed the kind of revenge that all the money in the world couldn't stop. The day had started with the promise of quiet celebration. The sun was streaming through the bedroom window of the apartment Leo, and I had shared for 3 years, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I woke up feeling the gentle weight of a new year, the soft transition from 28 to 29. I stretched, expecting to find Leo beside me, ready with a sleepy, happy birthday and a kiss. But his side of the bed was cold. The sheets were smooth, undisturbed. I figured he had gotten up early to make me breakfast, maybe one of his rare attempts at birthday pancakes. Smiling to myself, I padded out of the bedroom and into our small living room. There were no pancakes. The kitchen was clean, silent, and on the polished surface of our dining table, right where my placemat should have been, was a single white envelope. My name, Sadie, was written on the front in Leo's sharp, decisive handwriting. It wasn't a birthday card. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I picked it up. The paper was crisp, expensive, the kind Leo had started buying ever since he'd been promoted to a financial advisor for high-net-worth clients. Inside was a single sheet of matching stationery, folded neatly in half. The message was brutally short. Sadie, I'm sorry to do this on your birthday, but there's no easy way. I can't live this life anymore. I need more. Dr. Vance can give me the future I deserve. I've gone to be with her. Please don't try to contact me. The lease is paid up for the next 2 months. I'll have my things picked up later. Leo. I read it once, then twice. The words swam, refusing to make sense. Dr. Vance. Dr. Juliana Vance, the renowned cosmetic surgeon whose portfolio Leo managed. The woman he'd mentioned with a little too much reverence, her name always dripping with admiration for her drive and her unbelievable success. The 42-year-old powerhouse with a clinic that looked more like a luxury spa and a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. The note felt like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. There was no emotion in it, no regret, just cold, hard logistics. He'd paid the lease. He'd have his things collected. It was a business transaction. Our 5-year relationship, our engagement, our shared life, all terminated with the efficiency of a closed account. I sank into a dining chair, the note trembling in my hand. I thought back, my mind frantically searching for the signs I must have missed. And once the shock began to recede, the memories returned, tinged with a new, sickening clarity. The red flags hadn't just been there, they'd been giant, waving banners I had chosen to interpret as something else. There was the incident about 6 months ago. I had just landed a significant project at the university archives where I worked, a grant to digitize a collection of historical letters from the city's founding families. I was ecstatic. My job as a digital archivist wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, meticulous work, a hunt for truth in dusty boxes and forgotten files. But I loved it. I loved the sense of preserving history, of making hidden stories accessible. I came home that night buzzing with the news, eager to share it with Leo. He was scrolling through his phone, looking at pictures of a new sports car one of his clients had just bought. Leo, you won't believe it, we got the grant, I'd said, my voice full of pride. He looked up, his focus barely shifting from the screen. Oh, that's great, Sade, how much? It's not about the money, I explained, a little deflated. It's a huge honor, it's for the Albright collection, it's going to be a massive undertaking. Right, he said, his thumb resuming its flicking motion. So no raise then. I remember the chill that went through me. He used to be fascinated by my work. In our early days, he'd called me his history detective. He'd loved hearing about the obscure facts I'd unearth. But over the last year, his fascination had shifted from the stories I uncovered to the numbers in his clients' bank accounts. My quiet, academic world had started to seem small and unimpressive to him. Then there was the dinner party at his firm a few months later. It was a glittering affair filled with people whose names were on buildings. Leo was in his element, gliding through the crowd with a glass of champagne, his laugh a little too loud, his suit a little too sharp. I felt like a field mouse at a Panther convention. He introduced me to Dr. Juliana Vance that night. She was poised, elegant, with eyes that seemed to assess your net worth in a single glance. "This is my fiancé, Sadie," Leo had said, with a strange note of what sounded like an apology in his voice. "She's an archivist at the university." Dr. Vance gave me a polite, thin smile. "How quaint," she'd replied, before turning her full, undivided attention back to Leo, launching into a discussion about offshore investments. Leo was captivated, hanging on her every word. I stood beside them, invisible. He didn't include me in the conversation again for the rest of the night. On the car ride home, he was electric. "Did you see the way she carries herself, Sadie? That's power, that's real success. She started with nothing, and now she's a titan." I had tried to share my discomfort, to tell him how dismissed I felt. "She seemed a bit cold, Leo, and you kind of left me standing there." He'd frowned, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "You have to understand, Sadie, these are the people I need to be around. This is the world I'm breaking into. It's for us, for our future." But it wasn't for us. It was for him. I saw that now, with the cold, hard clarity of his farewell note. My world of dusty books and digital files wasn't big enough for his soaring ambitions. I was the comfortable, reliable before, and Dr. Juliana Vance was the flashy, successful after. He had traded me in for an upgrade. I sat there for what felt like hours, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. The birthday I'd been looking forward to was now just a date, a marker for the day my life split in two. The grief was a physical weight, a crushing pressure in my chest. But underneath the grief, something else was beginning to stir. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a cold, quiet hum. It was the feeling I got at work when I knew a vital piece of information was hiding just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. Leo and his new mentor thought they were untouchable, their world built on wealth and prestige. They believed they operated on a level I couldn't comprehend. What they didn't understand was my world. They didn't understand that information is its own kind of power. And they had no idea that my quiet, quaint job had made me an expert in one thing above all else: finding secrets that people thought were buried forever. The sun had climbed higher in the sky. My 29th birthday was ticking by. I folded the note, placed it back in the envelope, and stood up. The tears had stopped. The shock was hardening into something else, something solid and focused. Leo had made his choice based on a story of success and power. I decided, in that moment, that I would find out if that story was true. The first person I called was my best friend, Clara. My fingers felt clumsy on the phone screen, and my voice was a reedy whisper when she answered. "Hey, birthday girl, ready for our dinner celebration tonight?" she chirped, her voice bubbly and full of life. I opened my mouth to respond, but all that came out was a strangled sob. The sound was ugly, raw. The dam of my composure broke, and the full weight of the morning came crashing down. "Sadie, what's wrong? What happened?" Clara's tone shifted instantly from cheerful to deeply concerned. Through hiccuping breaths, I managed to read her the note. I heard her sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a string of words I couldn't repeat, a furious condemnation of Leo that was fierce and wonderfully loyal. "I'm coming over," she said, her voice firm. "Don't move, don't do anything, just stay on the phone with me until I get there." 20 minutes later, she was bursting through my door, her car keys still in her hand and a look of righteous fury on her face. She took one look at me, sitting numbly at the table, and enveloped me in a hug that felt like it was holding my fractured pieces together. Clara, a civil engineer who designed bridges for a living, had a personality to match her profession. Solid, dependable, and unshakable. She was the structure that held me up when my own foundations crumbled. The next few days were a blur of grief. Clara practically moved in, making sure I ate, fielding calls from my parents to whom I couldn't yet bear to speak, and packing a single, symbolic box with the few things of Leo's that remained: a toothbrush, a forgotten pair of cufflinks, the framed photo of us from our last vacation. She tucked it away in a closet, out of sight. Every corner of the apartment was a reminder of him. The armchair where he read his financial journals, the kitchen where we danced while cooking pasta, the indentation on his side of the mattress that still hadn't faded. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunted by the life that had been mine only days before. The cruelty of his timing was a special kind of poison. A birthday is meant to be a celebration of your existence, a day you are seen and cherished. He had turned it into a day of erasure, a message that I was not enough to even warrant a face-to-face conversation. I spiraled. I replayed every conversation, every moment. The last year, torturing myself with the what-ifs and if-onlys. If only I had been more glamorous, more ambitious, more like her. If only I had seen his ambition not as drive, but as a hunger that would eventually consume our relationship. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the apartment amplifying the loudness of my thoughts. During this time, I did what anyone with a broken heart and an internet connection does. I looked them up online. Leo had already wiped me from his social media. Our tagged photos, our relationship status gone. It was a swift, digital amputation. His profile now featured a new picture of him smiling on a balcony with a stunning city view, a glass of champagne in hand. He looked happy. Thriving. Then I looked up Dr. Juliana Vance. Her digital footprint was impeccable. She was the subject of glowing articles in lifestyle magazines, the sculptor of the elite, featured on lists of top doctors, and her clinic's website was a masterpiece of marketing. It showcased dramatic before and after photos, testimonials from anonymous but presumably famous clients, and a biography that painted her as a medical prodigy. Graduated top of her class, groundbreaking research in cellular regeneration, a fellowship at a prestigious Swiss institute. Her entire persona was built on a narrative of untouchable brilliance. Looking at her perfect, curated life and Leo's smug, celebratory photo, the grief inside me began to curdle. The sadness was still there, a deep, aching wound. But something new was mixing with it, a cold, sharp-edged anger. It wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was a quiet, simmering indignation. They had written me off as collateral damage in their story of success. They had assumed I would just crumble and fade away. The spark came on a Tuesday afternoon, about a week after my birthday. I was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, mindlessly scrolling through an online archival database for work, a task I could do on autopilot. I was looking at digitized university records from the 19th century, tracing the history of a particular academic department. I was a digital detective, sifting through layers of information, following faint trails, connecting disparate pieces of data to form a coherent story. And then it hit me. It wasn't a lightning bolt, but a slow, dawning realization. This is what I do. I don't build bridges like Clara. I don't manage fortunes like Leo. I don't sculpt faces like Dr. Vance. I find things. I follow footnotes, I cross-reference sources, I uncover the original version of a story. My entire professional life was about peeling back the polished surface to find the complex, often messy, truth underneath. Dr. Vance's story was too perfect. Her biography read like a screenplay. In my line of work, I knew that the most pristine narratives were often the ones with the most to hide. Real human lives, even successful ones, are filled with detours, mistakes, and inconsistencies. Her story had none. A new kind of energy began to flow through me, displacing the lethargy of grief. It was the thrill of the hunt, a feeling I knew well from my work. What if Dr. Vance's story, the very foundation of the life that had lured Leo away, wasn't true? What if her groundbreaking research wasn't entirely hers? The thought was audacious, perhaps even delusional, but it took root. Leo had left me because he believed I was small and my world was insignificant. He was drawn to the grand, glittering narrative of Dr. Vance. The most fitting revenge, I realized, wouldn't be to key her car or cause a dramatic scene. It would be to use the very skills he disdained to quietly and methodically check her sources. It would be to take the quaint tools of my trade and use them to audit her life. That evening, when Clara came over with takeout, she found me not on the couch, but at my desk, my laptop open, a look of intense concentration on my face. "What's this?" she asked, putting the food down. "You're working." "Sort of," I said, not looking away from the screen. "I'm just browse." She looked at my screen, which was open to a university's digital library search portal. "Okay, you're officially the only person I know who browses academic journals for fun. What are you looking for?" I finally turned to face her, and she must have seen the change in my eyes, the flicker of something other than sadness. "I'm just curious about something," I said, a small, tight smile on my lips. "I'm curious about the story of Dr. Juliana Vance." Clara studied me for a long moment, her expression shifting from concern to understanding. She pulled up a chair. "Okay," she said softly. "Tell me everything. How can I help?" The spiral had ended, the spark had been lit, the hunt was about to begin. The first rule of archival research is to start broad and then narrow your focus. Dr. Juliana Vance was a public figure, but her academic past was bedrock of her public persona. That was where I would begin my dig. My apartment, once a sanctuary of shared love, transformed into a command center for my quiet mission. The dining table became my workspace, covered in open browser tabs, digital notes, and half-empty mugs of tea. I started with the low-hanging fruit, her official biography, published on her clinic's website, in magazine features, and on professional networking sites. The story was consistent across all platforms: medical degree from a top-tier American university, a residency in dermatology, followed by a highly competitive fellowship in cosmetic and reconstructive surgery. The cornerstone of her reputation, however, was the research she allegedly conducted during her postdoctoral studies. It was cited everywhere as the Vance Protocol, a series of papers on accelerated cellular regeneration that had supposedly revolutionized certain anti-aging treatments. This was my target. A lie in a magazine interview is just words, but academic and scientific papers are different. They are part of a permanent, verifiable record. They have citations, publication dates, and peer reviews. They leave a trail. My first step was to compile a complete list of every paper she had ever authored or co-authored. This was simple enough, using academic search engines like JSTOR, PubMed, and Google Scholar. I found 12 papers in total, published over a 5-year period. The 3 most significant ones, detailing the Vance Protocol, were all published in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, a highly respected publication. I spent hours reading them. The language was dense, technical, and full of complex medical terminology. It was far outside my field of historical humanities, but the principles of research are universal. I wasn't trying to understand the science, I was trying to understand the structure of the information. I downloaded every paper, along with their extensive lists of citations. Clara would come over after work and find me hunched over my laptop, my eyes scanning lists of sources. "Find any smoking guns yet?" she'd ask, peering over my shoulder. "Not yet," I'd admit, rubbing my tired eyes. "Everything looks perfect, too perfect." And it did. Dr. Vance's citation record was flawless. She referenced all the right experts, all the foundational studies in her field. There were no obvious gaps, no strange leaps in logic that might suggest she was hiding a source. Her digital trail was clean, polished, and professionally manicured. It was like trying to find a crack in a solid wall of marble. For 2 weeks, I hit nothing but dead ends. I felt a familiar frustration creeping in, the kind I felt at work when a historical record was lost to fire or flood. I started to wonder if I was just projecting my heartbreak, wanting to find a flaw that wasn't there. Was this whole endeavor just a way to avoid processing my grief? One night, feeling defeated, I complained to Clara over video call. "It's useless," I said, slumping in my chair. "She's exactly who she says she is. Brilliant, successful, and completely untouchable. Maybe Leo was right to choose her." "Don't you dare say that," Clara said sternly. "He was wrong because of how he did it, Sadie. That's the only fact that matters. But listen, you're an archivist. What do you do when the main archive doesn't have what you're looking for? I thought for a moment. You look for alternate records. You search for adjacent collections. You look at what the people around your subject were doing. You search for the things that weren't deemed important enough to be included in the main file. Exactly, Clara said. So stop looking at her, look around her. Her words jolted me out of my funk. She was right. I had been focusing solely on Dr. Vance's published work in major English-language journals. I hadn't looked at the periphery. I hadn't investigated the context. My strategy shifted. Instead of analyzing Dr. Vance's papers, I began to analyze her sources. I started going through her bibliographies, one citation at a time. It was tedious, mind-numbing work. I cross-referenced hundreds of articles, looking up the work of scientists she had cited. My goal was to reconstruct the academic conversation she had been a part of. Who was working on similar research at the same time? What were the competing theories? I expanded my search to include international databases, a feature of my university's powerful library subscription. I started searching for keywords from her research: cellular regeneration, fibroblast stimulation, dermal matrix repair. But this time, I filtered for results from non-US institutions and in languages other than English. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming. I spent days sifting through research from Germany, Japan, and Korea. I used built-in translation software to get the gist of abstracts and summaries. Most of it was unrelated, different avenues of research. But I kept digging, fueled by a stubbornness I didn't know I possessed. I was a bloodhound on a cold trail, convinced there was a scent to be found. The apartment grew smaller, the world outside my window seemed to fade away. My life became a cycle of waking, brewing tea, sitting at my laptop, and falling asleep on the couch with the glow of the screen on my face. It was an obsession, but it felt more productive than grief. Grief was passive. This was active. This was a fight. I told myself I was just looking for a small inconsistency, a tiny error in a citation, anything to prove she wasn't perfect. I didn't truly expect to find a bombshell. I just wanted to find a single, solitary crack in her flawless facade. I had no idea that I was about to find a flaw so deep it would bring the entire structure crashing down. The breakthrough came at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning. My eyes were burning from staring at the screen, and my back ached from being hunched over my laptop. I was deep in the digital archives of a small, underfunded university in Lisbon, Portugal. I had been on a long, winding trail of citations, a sort of academic 6 degrees of separation, that had led me here. I was about to give up for the night, to concede defeat until the morning. I was searching for papers published between 1998 and 2003 that contained a specific combination of technical keywords from Dr. Vance's primary research. The search results were mostly duds. But then one title caught my eye. It was written in Portuguese, but the translation software provided a rough English version. A theoretical model for fibroblast reactivation in aging dermis. The author was a man I'd never heard of, Dr. Mateo Almeida. The paper had been published in the university's own internal, non-peer-reviewed journal in 1999. It was essentially a digital pamphlet, the kind of small-scale publication that rarely gets noticed by the international community. Dr. Vance's first major paper on a strikingly similar topic was published 2 years later, in 2001. My heart began to beat a little faster. It was probably nothing. Parallel research happens all the time. 2 scientists on opposite sides of the world having the same idea. It was a long shot. I clicked the link to download the PDF. The file was a scan of a physical document, slightly crooked and grainy. It was clear this university didn't have the budget for a state-of-the-art digital program. The paper was 12 pages long. I couldn't read the Portuguese, so I started the painstaking process of copying and pasting the text, paragraph by paragraph, into a more advanced translation engine. The first few pages were standard academic introductions, but as I got to the core of Dr. Almeida's theoretical model, a cold chill washed over me. The language was different, but the ideas, they were identical. The step-by-step process he laid out, the specific chain of cellular interactions he hypothesized, it was the Vance protocol. It wasn't just similar, it was the blueprint. My hands were trembling. I pulled up Dr. Vance's 2001 paper on another screen, placing the two documents side by side. Her paper was more polished, filled with experimental data that this Dr. Almeida's paper lacked. His was purely theoretical. But the theory itself, the very intellectual architecture of the research, was the same. She had taken his blueprint and built a house on top of it. And in her extensive list of citations, the name Dr. Mateo Almeida was nowhere to be found. This was it, this was the crack. For the next hour, I felt a frantic, electric energy. I dug into Dr. Almeida. He was a ghost online. He had no major publications after this one. He had no professional networking profile. It was as if he had published this one brilliant idea and then vanished from the academic world. I searched the university's archives again. I found a staff directory from 1999. There he was, Dr. Mateo Almeida, a postdoctoral research fellow. I searched the directory for 2000. He was gone. What happened to him? Why did he stop publishing? I started a new search, this time for Dr. Juliana Vance's professional history. Where was she in 1999? Her official biography said she was doing postdoctoral work. I dug into her university records, and then I found it. A line item in her travel grant report from the fall of 1999. She had attended a small, international dermatology conference. The host city, Lisbon, Portugal. The room felt like it was spinning. I could see the sequence of events with horrifying clarity. A young, ambitious Juliana Vance attends an obscure conference. She sees a presentation by a little-known researcher, Dr. Almeida, or perhaps picks up a copy of his paper. She sees the brilliance in his theory, but also sees that he lacks the resources and connections to ever make it famous. He's a nobody at a small university. She is a rising star at a major American institution. She took his idea, she took it back to her state-of-the-art lab and ran the experiments to prove his theory. Then she published it under her own name, confident that no one in the prestigious world of American and British medical journals would ever stumble upon a grainy PDF from a small university in Lisbon. And she was right. For over 20 years, no one had. The injustice of it was staggering. This man, Dr. Almeida, was the true genius. His intellectual labor was the foundation of her entire career, of the fortune she had built, of the glamorous life that had so captivated Leo. She was a fraud, not just a cheat but a thief. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was more than just a missing citation. This was career-ending, legacy-destroying academic theft. My grief for Leo, my feelings of inadequacy, all of it evaporated, replaced by a sense of profound, righteous purpose. This was no longer about my broken heart. It was about his. It was about correcting a historical record. It was about giving credit where it was due, even if it was 20 years too late. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a pale gray light into the room. I hadn't slept at all. I looked at the two papers on my screen, the stolen idea and the celebrated copy. I had my smoking gun. Now I just had to build the case, and I knew exactly how to do it. Finding the crack in the facade was one thing, proving it was a structural failure was another. A single, uncited paper could be dismissed as coincidence or an oversight. I needed more. I needed to build a case so airtight, so meticulously documented, that it would be undeniable to any academic or medical review board. My mission shifted from searching to constructing. For the next month, my life became a singular obsession with Dr. Mateo Almeida and the ghost of his stolen work. I channeled every ounce of my professional skill into the task. I wasn't just a heartbroken woman seeking revenge anymore. I was an archivist on the most important project of my life. My first step was to establish a definitive timeline. I had Vance in Lisbon in the fall of 1999. I had Almeida's paper published in his university's journal in the spring of that same year. That was the core. Now I needed to flesh it out. I went back to the Lisbon University's digital archives. They were clunky and poorly organized, a challenge I relished. I searched for the conference Dr. Vance had attended. After days of digging through scanned program brochures and newsletters, I found it, the fourth annual symposium on advances in dermal science. And on the list of presenters for a small, afternoon breakout session was Dr. Mateo Almeida. The title of his presentation matched his paper. I took a screenshot, carefully documenting the source URL and access date. This was Exhibit A. It put both of them in the same building on the same day, discussing the same topic. Next, I focused on the papers themselves. I needed to do more than just say the ideas were similar. I had to prove it, line by line. I used advanced text comparison software, the kind used to detect student plagiarism at my university. I ran Almeida's translated text against Vance's three core, Vance Protocol papers. The results were damning. The software flagged entire paragraphs where the structure, the sequence of ideas, and the specific terminology were nearly identical. Vance had rephrased things, swapped out synonyms, and padded the text with her own experimental data, but the intellectual DNA was unmistakably Almeida's. It was like she had taken his handwritten letter and simply typed it up, assuming no one would ever see the original. I created a new document, the Almeida-Vance comparison. I formatted it into a 3-column table. Column 1 had a passage from Almeida's paper in the original Portuguese. Column 2 had the English translation. Column 3 had the corresponding passage from one of Vance's papers. I highlighted the similarities in yellow. By the time I was done, the document was a sea of yellow. It was a visual testament to the theft. This was Exhibit B. But what had happened to Dr. Almeida? This question haunted me. A man with such a brilliant idea doesn't just vanish. My instinct told me his story was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. Finding him was the hardest part. He had no digital presence. I started searching public records in Portugal, a difficult task from my apartment in the US. I tried social media, searching for anyone with his name, but found hundreds of them. I was about to give up when I had another idea, born from my work with historical documents. I started searching for his family. I looked for obituaries, birth records, anything that might give me a clue. Finally, I found it. An obituary from 2005 for an elderly woman in Lisbon. In the list of surviving family members was her son, Dr. Mateo Almeida, and it mentioned his place of residence, a small town in the Azores, a remote group of Portuguese islands in the middle of the Atlantic. The obituary also mentioned his profession. He wasn't a researcher anymore. He was a high school science teacher. The pathos of it struck me deeply. This brilliant mind, whose work had built a multi-million-dollar empire for someone else, was teaching basic biology to teenagers on a remote island. He had run away from the academic world that had betrayed him. I knew I couldn't contact him directly. That would be crossing a line. It wasn't my place to reopen what was surely a deep wound. But knowing his story, knowing the human cost of Vance's theft, solidified my resolve. I began assembling the final dossier. It was my masterpiece. It began with a concise, one-page cover letter that laid out the accusation in cold, professional language. It was anonymous, stating that the enclosed information had been discovered during a routine academic audit. Then came the evidence, organized with tabs and an index, just like the archival collections I managed at the university. Exhibit A, the conference program proving Vance and Almeida were in the same place at the same time. Exhibit B, the full text of Almeida's original paper. Exhibit C, the full text of Vance's 3 derivative papers. Exhibit D, the 15-page, 3-column Almeida-Vance comparison table with all the damning yellow highlights. Exhibit E, a full bibliography of both academics, showing Almeida's research career ending abruptly after 1999 and Vance's beginning its meteoric rise in 2001. Exhibit F, a concluding analysis that pointed out the statistical impossibility of such an overlap being a coincidence. I printed 3 copies on high-quality paper, the same kind Leo had used for his farewell note. I bound each one in a simple, professional black cover. They looked official, serious, and irrefutable. Clara came over the night I finished. She picked one up, flipping through the pages, her eyes wide. "Sadie," she breathed, her voice full of awe. "This is incredible. It's like a legal document. You've left no room for doubt." "That's the point," I said, feeling a strange calm. "In her world, money and lawyers can make problems disappear. In my world, facts are stubborn things. Primary sources don't lie." She looked at me, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once you send these, there's no going back." I thought of Leo's note. I thought of Dr. Vance's condescending smile. I thought of Dr. Almeida, teaching high school science in the Azores. "I'm sure," I said. "He left me because he thought my life was small. He chose her because he thought her story was great. It's time everyone knew the real story." The next morning, I mailed the 3 dossiers. I didn't use a mailbox near my apartment. I drove to a post office in a different town, wore a simple baseball cap, and paid in cash. There would be no trail leading back to me. The 3 envelopes were addressed to the key pillars of Dr. Juliana Vance's professional world. The president of the State Medical Licensing Board. The dean of the graduate school at the university that had awarded her doctorate and celebrated her research. The editor-in-chief of the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, the publication that had built her reputation. Dropping the packages into the mail slot felt both monumental and anticlimactic. For over a month, my entire existence had been focused on this goal. Now the work was done. The evidence was out of my hands, moving through the postal system, destined to land on desks that held the power to enact real consequences. All I could do was wait. The wait was excruciating. It was a new kind of silence. The frantic energy of the hunt was gone, replaced by a quiet, humming anxiety. Every day, I checked the news, scanning medical journals and university press releases, looking for any sign that my bombshell had landed. For 3 weeks, there was nothing. The silence was deafening. I started to doubt myself. Had I made a mistake? Had the dossiers been intercepted? Were they dismissed as the work of a crank and thrown in the trash? Did the powerful Dr. Vance have allies in these institutions who would simply bury the evidence to avoid a scandal? The thought was terrifying. If this failed, then she truly was untouchable. Clara did her best to keep my spirits up. "These things take time, Sadie," she reasoned. "Boards like this have procedures. They have to form committees, consult lawyers. They're not going to issue a press release the day after they get a letter. The silence means they're taking it seriously." I hope she was right. I tried to distract myself, throwing myself back into my work at the archive with a renewed focus. I tried to reclaim my life, to go for walks, to read books that had nothing to do with cellular biology. But the question mark of my quiet revenge loomed over everything. Then it began. It didn't start with a bang, but with a whisper. The first sign was subtle. I was on the Journal of Investigative Dermatology's website and noticed that Dr. Vance's 3 seminal papers now had a new notation next to them. It was a single sentence in small, red font. "The publisher has been alerted to a potential issue of academic integrity regarding this article, and an investigation is underway." My heart leaped into my throat. It was happening. They hadn't ignored it. They were investigating. A week later, the second pillar wobbled. A small news brief appeared on the university's official website, buried in the alumni news section. It was written in dry, bureaucratic language, announcing that an independent review of past academic work has been initiated concerning research conducted by alumna Dr. Juliana Vance. It was carefully worded to avoid alarm, but for anyone who knew what to look for, it was a confirmation. The fallout after that was slow, methodical, and devastatingly professional. It played out not in the flashy gossip magazines that had once adored her, but in the quiet, serious corridors of power she had worked so hard to conquer. The journal formally retracted all 3 of her papers. The notice of retraction was clinical and brutal. It cited a failure to properly attribute foundational theoretical work and an unacceptable overlap with previously published research. The Vance Protocol was officially erased from the scientific record. Next, the university concluded its review. Dr. Vance's prestigious Alumna of the Year award was rescinded. A quiet statement was released announcing that they were reviewing the validity of her doctoral credentials. The implication was clear: they were preparing to strip her of her PhD. The final blow came from the medical board. After their own lengthy investigation, they suspended her medical license pending a full hearing. The reason cited was unprofessional conduct and academic fraud. The empire crumbled not with a fiery explosion, but with the quiet, systematic removal of its foundations. Her career wasn't just over, it was being unwritten. Without her license, she couldn't practice. Without her research, her reputation as a pioneer was a lie. Without her university's backing, she was just another disgraced academic. The news eventually trickled down to the lifestyle blogs and society pages, but they were late to the story. They reported on her clinic closing its doors, on her sudden disappearance from the charity circuit. They speculated about financial trouble or burnout. They had no idea that the cause of this spectacular fall from grace was sitting in a small apartment across town, sipping tea, and watching it all unfold with a quiet, solemn sense of justice. I felt no giddy triumph, no vicious glee. I felt a profound sense of closure. I had corrected the record. I had used my skills, the very skills Leo had found so unimpressive, to reveal the truth. The revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, factual, and permanent. It was a footnote in the history books of medicine, but a footnote I had written. And as the story of Dr. Juliana Vance came to its ignominious end, I knew it was only a matter of time before the final piece of my old life came knocking at my door. He showed up on a rainy Tuesday evening, nearly 3 months after I had mailed the dossiers. The relentless drizzle outside matched the dreary end of the saga I had been watching from afar. I had just finished dinner and was curled on the couch with a book when the buzzer rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Clara was out of town for a work conference. I pressed the intercom button. "Hello." A voice, hesitant and familiar, came through the speaker. "Sadie, it's Leo." My heart didn't leap. It didn't pound. It just gave a single, solid thud like a heavy door closing. I had known this moment would come. I had rehearsed it in my head 100 times. I took a deep breath, buzzed him in, and waited by the door. When I opened it, the man standing in the hallway was almost unrecognizable. The arrogant, polished sheen he had acquired during his time with Dr. Vance was gone. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was damp and unkempt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired and defeated. He looked like the man I had first met, before the hunger for status had consumed him, but there was no nostalgia in the sight. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I stepped aside, leaving the door open, and walked back into the living room without a word. I didn't offer him a seat. I just stood by the window, my arms crossed, and waited for him to speak. He lingered in the entryway, looking around the apartment as if seeing a ghost. "You changed the curtains," he mumbled. "I did," I said, my voice even and calm. He finally moved into the room, stopping a few feet away from me. "I'm so sorry, Sadie," he began, the words rushing out. "I was an idiot. I was blind. I got caught up in something that wasn't real. She wasn't who I thought she was." "Oh," I said, raising an eyebrow. "And who did you think she was?" "I thought she was brilliant, powerful," he stammered. "I thought that was the life I wanted. The money, the prestige, it was all a lie. The things they're saying about her research, it's all true. Her life is ruined. Everything is gone, the penthouse, the accounts, all of it." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "It was all fake." "I see," I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "So you're here because the life you chose turned out to be built on a lie. Is that it? No, I'm here because I made the biggest mistake of my life, he insisted, taking a step closer. I should have never left. I miss you. I miss this, our quiet life. I was wrong to look down on it. It was real. What we had was real. I almost laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. He missed the life he had so easily discarded now that his shiny new one had imploded. He wasn't mourning us. He was mourning his own poor investment. You didn't just leave, Leo, I said, my voice hardening. You left me a note. On my birthday, you wrote off 5 years of our lives like it was a bad debt. You didn't miss this life a few months ago when you were posing for photos on her penthouse balcony. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I know, it was a horrible, cowardly thing to do, there's no excuse. But I've learned my lesson, Sadie. I've been humbled. I want to come home. Home? The word was a weapon he was trying to use on me, but it had lost its power. This was my home now. I had cleansed it of his memory, of the grief he had caused. I had rebuilt my life within these walls. There is no home for you here anymore, Leo, I said, the words clear and final. He stared at me, his face crumbling. But we were engaged. I love you. No, you don't, I replied, and for the first time I felt a flicker of pity for him. You don't love me. You love what I represent. A safe harbor now that your battleship has sunk. You loved the idea of Dr. Vance's success, and now you love the idea of my stability. The one thing you have never seemed to value is me, Sadie, the actual person. The quaint archivist whose work you thought was so small. He looked utterly confused, as if he couldn't comprehend my refusal. He expected me to be the same heartbroken woman he had left, ready to welcome the prodigal fiancé home with open arms. He didn't realize I had changed. I can change, he pleaded. We can fix this. Some things can't be fixed, I said, walking to the door and opening it. You made your choice, Leo. You chose a story you thought was better. It turns out you just didn't read the footnotes. You need to leave now. He stood there for a long moment, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. I wasn't his backup plan. I was the protagonist of my own story now, and his chapter was over. He walked out without another word, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As I closed the door, I didn't feel a sense of victory over him. The true victory had already happened. It was in the quiet nights spent hunting for the truth, in the meticulous construction of the dossier, in the reclamation of my own self-worth. Rejecting Leo wasn't the final act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. I walked back to the window and looked out at the rain-streaked city. My world was still quiet. My job was still about digging through the past, but I no longer felt small. I knew my own power now. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was real. It was the power of truth, meticulously unearthed and brought into the light. And in the quiet that followed, I found a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than any love he could have ever offered. I was Sadie, 29, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly, completely, and happily on my own. So for anyone out there who has been made to feel small, who has been written off and left behind, I have to ask, what is your hidden superpower? What is the quiet, unassuming skill you possess that others might overlook? Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't a loud confrontation, but a quiet demonstration of your own unique, unexpected strength. What do you think? Was I right to do what I did, or should I have just tried to move on?